Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Torrance, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on proof of afterlife, whose mission is to bring hope and inspiration to others and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. If these interviews resonate with you and you want to hear more like them, you can support the podcast by liking, subscribing, and sharing with like-minded friends. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of the Magic is Real family. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Thank you so much for being here today. My guest today is Jacob Cooper. I'm so honored to have him here today. Jacob is a healer. He's a speaker. He's the author of the book, Life After Breath, which is the story of his near-death experience and the insights that he gleaned from this experience, which of course we're going to talk about today. He is a psychotherapist. And instead of, those are the bullet points. But I always like to start, Jacob, by saying, well, first of all, welcome and thank you for being here. And
Oh, a true honor. Thank you.
yeah, it's great to have you. I like to actually have you tell us what it is that you do for people, because I know that you are of service in so many ways to others. And I think only you can really speak to your personal experience.
Yeah. I try to do the best that I can to reach people from the ground up. I think obviously in the field that I'm in between both worlds, there's a monopolization on one way to do things, and we're multidimensional beings requiring multidimensional resources and needs. And so I always try to find cunning ways to reach people where their feet are at and to not bypass current situations. So if that's coming to me for a psychotherapy session or hypnosis session, past life regression session, or just hearing me speak, like I run all these workshops throughout the world. um it To me, I guess what keeps me up is making sure that everyone gets something from a micro or macro interaction you know
Oh, that's so well said, and that's beautiful. What a gift to be able to do this kind of work. Normally, I start out by asking my guests about their childhood and what happened before their near-death experience.
Mm,
But your story is a little bit different because you experienced your experience when you were 3 years old. Why
yeah,
don't we start there? Tell us what happened.
yeah. I think my near-death experience speaks to most of us in a sense that from before we got here, we come from a place of wisdom, understanding, clarity, and an all-knowingness. And we come into this finite body, and some people hold on to a little bit of that recall, and some forget. But either way, the doorways to the truth is in the stillness of the mind and the quiet of the heart. And my near-death experience really allowed me to find myself by willing to lose myself. And, this was due to the contraction of pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough, which is a highly contagious, fatal, condition for infants or children, even some rare cases, adults. So, I suffocated as a result of whooping cough, and I was able to find from the deprivation of my own oxygen a whole new breath, which was the breath of eternity that we're all bestowed and created from.
Wow, that's such a beautiful way to put it. I know that when you experience this, obviously it was extremely traumatic and very painful. What happened once I mean, you can explain it in any order that you like, but what was it that actually caused your soul to exit this body and go to whatever people call the other side, the other dimension,
Mhm.
and explain to us and maybe what you call it?
I always say in my workshops, when we let go, our consciousness grows. And for me, my body, there was nothing for me to hold on to. I was in a playground at 3 years old in September of 1993. And there's a lot of allegorical and symbology behind my NDE, which we could get into. But I was a child innocently playing in a playground. And I was climbing up a ladder on a slide, and I began to suffocate. I guess it's, with whooping cough, you start coughing, and it leads to suffocation. But I lost my breath, which, unless you're on a ventilator, and even then, that doesn't cause us to continue to breathe. If you lose your breath, it's pretty hard for the body to function, properly. And so everything just began to shut down within my body, as if you're in a home and take a power breaker, and shut one switch at a time. And, it was kind of like going into a car and trying to rev up your engine isn't working. And so, my body wasn't properly functioning due to this suffocation. And, once that happened, there was nothing for me to hold on to. So it's just kind of like in this place where I wasn't in my body, but I wasn't on the other side yet. And it just felt like an eternity of kind of hell, so to speak, at this period where I was just wasn't here, wasn't there. And the breath isn't something that we just take for granted. We don't even think about, but what keeps us human and alive and in this body. And having that taken, I think was a double-edged sword, which allowed me to recall this experience, in vivid clarity from such a young age. But also what that came from that was incredible trauma, as well as brain trauma to my brain because that I had from my brain suffocating, shutting down, due to the deprivation of oxygen. And I think once, from what I experienced, once my brain, to answer your question, and not go in circles. Once my brain was deprived of oxygen and literally just felt it snap in half was when I was able to cross over. And so I really see the brain as the filter between the two worlds. And that's really been an impetus behind my work in mindfulness and hypnosis to have the mind and the brain not work against us, but work for us, and using the brain and the mind, not letting it use us.
Yeah, I love that you talked about that. I'm so interested in this topic of neuroscience and spirituality as it
Mm,
relates to spirituality and our
mm,
consciousness, who
mm,
we are, and how we can train our mind
mm.
to work advantageously because it does work against us. And that's why we always say the mind is a powerful thing
Right,
because
right.
we can manifest so many things. What really strikes me about your story is that you were so young and you remember
Mm,
it so vividly. Now, I have a very clear memory of being 3
mm.
because it was sort of a traumatic time for me,
Right,
not
right.
severe. I had, beautiful family and everything. I was very well loved and cared for, but there was a lot of emotional stuff going on and kids being unkind to me and me having severe anxiety disorder and being in therapy at age 2 and 3. So for anxiety. So I'd love to hear it's sort of it fascinates me, and I absolutely
Mm,
believe 100% that the reason people remember these things is because they say it's realer than what's here, that this is more of an illusion, and what's over there is actually more real. And when I say over there, I understand that to be it's here. It's here.
oh,
We
right,
just don't
right,
necessarily
right.
see it. So forgive the terminology. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you experienced and what you do remember.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was just talking to my friend, Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience. We both agree that the near-death experience, having the term death in it, is the opposite of any experience that you have. It's the ultimate life experience, which why he, authored the book Life After Life, because he wanted to really emphasize that this as a rebirth and an expansive experience that had the death of the body is real, but the death of the soul cannot ever exist. Infinite cannot be finite. But for me, I had from this near death experience, I was able to have encounters of my own spirit guides. I saw an endless sea of angels that was, like you said, literally in front of me. And I was able to have an understanding that the other side, felt like a million miles away, but it was also right here too. uh, if something is infinite, you can't say, okay, it's right here. It's everywhere. It's all around us and in the doorways of our own heart. We're forever connected to heaven. It's not, a specific place on a GPS map. It's all that we're a part of. And we're even, I don't think we're here to create heaven on earth. We're a part of heaven here on this earth, and we have to find ways to remember that there's no real separation other than their own forgetfulness, and tricks of the mind of this physical reality. But I experienced, countless, angels floating very peacefully in front of me, my own spirit guides, Christ consciousness. I had an awareness of what I could best describe as the all that ever is and ever was, and the endless climactical, never-ending pinnacle of life force itself, which was God. It's to the best description. I had encounters with soul family members, and I was given a life review of not only this lifetime, but different imagery from past carnations. And I use the term past because that speaks to the linearity of the mind and how it processes, but not to the experience itself. As you know, when I went to the other side, I recognized the timelessness. And the best way I could describe it was in this energy of all was well, will be well, was well, and not having anything that I needed. It was just in a place of infinite abundance and infinite love. And what I would say is that's diametrically opposite to our experience. We're used to, in order to feel something, we need to do something, or we're used to worrying about what's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What do we have to tense ourselves up from? Or as Lao Tzu would say, what's causing us in the past to be depressed or in the future to be anxious? But it really does speak to what I work with in mindfulness as this eternal moment of grace that's available to us at all times, and that's reality itself. Everything else is just a trick of the mind and a blockage from the true reality at hand. But I was aware of my own dharma as well, because I asked, you know, a lot of near-death experiencers have two options. They're either told by the beings of light or their counsel that they have to stay, or they're given an option. And my, angelic team, soul family, put me in a positionality of autonomy. And I said, well, if I do stay, then what's going to happen? And then I was provided with flashing imagery of different acts and different ways to serve and to have continuity of the ultimate eternal continuity of life after death, so to speak, and my own life's work. And I just said, as beautiful and divine as the other side is, um, making it on this side is even a grander opportunity and something that I couldn't turn down, so that we didn't have to wait till the body goes to go to heaven, that we could really experience this in this moment. And with that, everything dissipated, and my spirit guides just, I was in an endless sea of doubt for turning down heaven and, just coming back to this body. And I think in a way it speaks to us where we have all this charting phase that happens in the life between life phase, which, Michael Newton in his books highlights. But, it sounds good over there. Then when you get here, it's like, oh my God, because you see things from a much different vantage point on both sides. Um, had some doubt, and I was just kicking myself as to what I was thinking. And, really the profound message was the power of thoughts, the power of intention, the power of trust in spirit over our own judgments, our own fears. And I think that's very symbolic of a lot of our life's work is trust, and learning. Like a model looks at a lens, they don't look at it, they look through it, and to look through life and not just at it at a superficial vantage point. So, I mean, with that, everything dissipated and was from the power of choice and the power of choosing. And I think that's how we're all born in a way. It's a choice. It is intention. There is a path, for this. But you're also very much aware that I was in my body. People were calling me on the ground, and I was aware of angels in front of me. But I was aware of this other form past the meat suit of the body that I had, to the side of my body. I was able to have a lot more awareness of all the people around me in the park that day. I was in the playground that day, and I knew a lot more about them that would meet the eye. And it was just fascinating to how much more is underlaying the surface. But the best, the message I got is all is connected to spirit, all is from spirit. We could think that we are not that, but we cannot not be who we truly are, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I have so many questions about each little thing you
Right,
said.
right.
Plus, I also want to cover so much more. But one of the things that it I keep hearing that keeps coming up is, first of all, that message of trust, which I had just shared that I'm getting tattooed on my wrist. And I've never had a
Oh,
tattoo before because I've always been so precious about this meat suit. Like,
right, right.
this is my one and only. I don't, like, don't want to mar it anymore, but I'm doing it as like a release of that. Is it to say this is just a meat suit? You can draw on
Right.
it. Not
Yeah.
anything crazy, but I'm putting trust because of this theme that keeps coming up in this work that
Yeah.
we do and the discussions that we have about it is so hard to trust when we're here because there's so many challenges, which is,
Right.
I
Right.
would assume, why we're here. Um, and I'd love to hear more about that, but also in your work, I'd love to know how is it that you help people to get to that place of better flow and better trust?
Mm. Yeah, I mentioned previous carnations. One of what I experienced in my near-death experience as well as a child, was this lifetime in which I took my own life, which has been evidentially validated by psychics and mediums before, I became public with my experience. And I chronicled that in Life After Breath. So the validation of it was given to me of these kind of like haunting imagery. But I took my own life, my last carnation, and within my NDE, I was able to see, the children that I had an impact on, and the the chronology of events that led to my own suicide, and as well as what happened after suicide, where I wasn't put in a place of purgatorial judgment. It was just coming back to the light, but also the clear understanding that I forgot who I was. I forgot what I was connected to. I had more placement in the outer world than the inner world. And the outer world should just merely be a reflection of the inner world. And I think a lot of people live from the outside in versus the inside out. And so I think from completion we begin. I think my near death experience spoke to what I experienced when I committed suicide, in which my back was against the wall. And I think from speaking to our own self and going through those experiences, we're able to really be present with others who are going through that. And I think, if you look at any powerful guides or any powerful influential individuals, it's not that their lives are perfect all the time. They go through the great depths of suffering. It's kind of like the phoenix out of the ashes, but they're only able, and I think everything is about the experiential reality. And sometimes we see things as a face value because we have egocentric identities. We think that it's all about us, but really, we're all here to be guides to others. And I think the best way to embody God is to find yourself within service, which is a principle in Alcoholics Anonymous. But really, to me, the embodiment of God is being there of service and having a ripple effect, within your life. But the near death experience is very symbolical, with what I experienced in suicide, and, trusting the light at the end of the tunnel, trusting the infinite light over my own fear, knowing that whatever you're experiencing is not, to break you, but rather to make you in a way and to evolve your own spirit and to allow you to trust, to turn trust into a knowing that we, in the long run, we can never truly damage, we can never truly die. We're infinite, brilliant, beautiful, spirits. And sometimes it's looking at darkness, like I experienced in the deprivation of oxygen, to look at it and to understand the infinite light behind that as all there ever is, was, and will be. And I don't know which is more euphoric, looking at that infinite light or having the catharsis of darkness as nothing more than the value that we praise it as. It's truly coming back to the nothingness of which it came, and understanding that light, when you burn everything away, is all that there is left. Much like Wayne Dyer would speak about, when you squeeze out an orange, all that is left is, orange juice. And you squeeze out who we are, it's just infinite love and infinite consciousness. Everything else is just a distraction or a false sense of self and reality. Mm.
Yes, and it's so easy to get caught up in that 3D world and everything happening around us, and to be so focused
Mm.
on everything
Right,
tangible
right,
in this moment. And
right,
I loved what you had said about and I keep hearing this too over and over and over recently. So I
right,
feel like there's something really poignant about this. It's that analogy of the iceberg where you can see just the tip of the iceberg and
right.
the rest is submerged. And really, this really is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a cliche, but this is just a tiny bit of what actually exists. And people often have trouble believing it because they can't see it. And I know that you also do past life hypnosis
Mhm.
and healing and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you, in your work, you do help people to become aware of what is submerged or what
Yeah.
has been submerged, rather?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that, because even physically sitting here today, we think we're in a chair, but we're not. We're in a chair, in a room, in a state, on a spinning planet, in a galaxy around the sun. So even on a physical basis, we're not what we think. And if that's the case, imagine, our inner being. And, if that's infinite, it has no true limitation for it, and it's infinitely unfolding. So, it really does speak to how small we perceive ourselves versus the reality at hand. But past life regression, I was really inspired by it from, having my subsequent experiences and recollection as a young child, and being quite traumatized with that and not knowing what to do or anyone to go with. And so I, to me, it's just my way of giving back, that awareness to others. And I think ultimately we're all driving on a road and some people are on bumpy roads that you've been on and you want to find ways to help them but from knowing those bumpy roads, you're able to have an understanding, degree of empathy from that. And I think this, like you said, it's all about the experiential reality to be present, because I do believe this is all a training school to be a guide, and so in many ways. So we don't have to wait till we die to get to that point. We can do that here. But I found that so much of life from a near-death experience was in the subconscious mind, or you call it the superconscious, higher conscious. There's many different terms of it, but this mind that in this reality that we're just not aware of. And hypnosis works with the subconscious mind, which is, thoughts, events, memories that we're not aware of that might be governing our lifetimes. And they say the subconscious governs around 85% of our actions. So, it's just kind of like a look at it as the web of everything that's ever happened to us. And if we do believe that we're here, we also have previous carnations, and that would include other memories that might be, helping us or going against us, as an interference or as a boundary. And I think ultimately, if we want to move the needle, awareness is key, and having awareness at the point of origin, to some of our thoughts influencing our behaviors, is important. So past life regression is great. It's a gentle form of hypnosis. It gets people in a very relaxed state to really access the higher mind, and to really access different memories and different lifetimes. And and a lot of it is very stigmatized. It's very focused on the trauma, and that's a part of it, or just the negative. But it could also give us a parlaying understanding of some of our greater gifts and talents and wisdom that we've gained within countless lifetimes, here on earth and beyond. Because I say beyond because I do regressions, and some people have memories not on this earth plane but in other galactical forms of existence, which, as a certified hypnotherapist and doing this training, you're just taught like a certain way. And I find that the ultimate education is actually working with clients and what you see versus just the general framework of what you provided within the coursework. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit. Because I watch, this is all I do. I don't watch TV. I watch
Right. The Gaia
s-
networks and all that stuff.
yes,
Yeah.
I watch
Right.
all of that stuff and constant YouTube interviews, um and I'm somebody who never would have believed any of this stuff many years
Right.
ago. I would have
Right.
been like, that's ridiculous. But
Mm.
there is that idea that our entire universe is one. There's no such thing as really aliens in the sense of the word, that they're other. If there's other life forms, we're all part of it. We're all
Right.
part of the entire galaxy, and we have existed on other planets, I believe.
Mm.
And we still do. And it's all just one
Right.
big space, which I think is so mind blowing to think about. Um, so much, there's so much in there
Yeah.
to
I
unpack.
also, at the past life regression, have a near death experience. I held on to this experience for, almost 2 decades. And it wasn't until I read Betty Adie's book called Embraced by the Light that I came across the term near death experience. And that allowed me to have a label. And I think if you could name it, you could tame it. And so for myself, that gave me universality behind my experience, because it was just so sacred to me. I didn't tell anyone. It was so special that I didn't feel words justified, what happened. And so the moment of suffocation lasted around 2 decades, in which I wasn't able to properly felt like it was right to express it. I think there was an internal awareness, but verbalizing and externalizing it is different. And so for myself, Betty gave me the confidence to do that. But I find, within the years that I've done workshops and talks, a lot of people feel inspired, but also deflated, because we come from a place of privilege. I mean, it's obviously for me to talk about all these good things, but I don't want to make this a religion where people become very dependent on my experience and they've become very disempowered within their own selves. And I look at past life regression as a way for people to have a similar kind of, it's like, many different paths of the amount of consciousness, but all leads to a similar unfoldment of expansiveness. So you don't have to go through the trauma to have expanded consciousness of suffocation that I went through. You could be in quite a relaxed state and have an understanding of one of the most important questions that many have to ask is, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? And what is some of my dharma? What is my life purpose? And how do I transform my karma, my stories into my own dharma, my purpose. And past life regression could really give some insight from the life between lives and going through different lifetimes as to some clues as to why you're here and what we're here to progress and evolve on.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it does it makes sense in the sense of karma not being something that happens to you because you did something bad, and so something
Right.
bad's going to happen to you. It's karma in the sense that whatever happened in your other lives, you're working through, and
Right.
there's more of that to work through here. I did want to ask you more about your personal experience,
Mm.
the I want to say the aftermath in a sense because you were just 3 years old at the time, but your soul is ageless. So your
Mhm.
soul understood the wisdom and the lessons that you were shown on
Mhm.
the other side. When you came back and here you are just a child, did you retain that knowledge of the universe? And also, what challenges might you have um, endured in terms of assimilating back to the 3D reality? And now you're this old, I mean, now you've become aware. You're not just an old soul.
Right.
You really are pretty much schooled on everything at that such a young age. And I know that you also were raised in a religious environment as well. So feel
Yeah,
free to share anything you'd like about
uh,
that.
it was definitely a roller coaster. Um, the moment that I got out of my near-death experience, a lot of near-death experiencers will just say how loving and light they were after that experience, but my experience was totally diametrically opposite, where I was quite enraged, within, my stay at the hospital. And my mother actually told me that I kicked the doctor because I was so frustrated. But I think a lot of that had to do with suppressed emotions that I couldn't express, with how I experienced this experience. And I just wanted to shake everyone in the room to understand what I had, and I couldn't put words to it at the moment. Words were just so limiting behind this incredibly euphoric experience. But um, that was the challenging part, and the other part is kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, where, if you're familiar with the Republic, in which Plato talks about, I know Dr. Ray Mahmoodi, with his philosophy degree, always talks about philosophers and their viewpoints of the afterlife, which hopefully you could get him on too. If, we'll talk about that. But Plato's allegory of the cave, where you look at, an image of reality, by, I guess the background sources of power and information behind you, and you're in shackles, and that's what you see reality as. And I broke through the shackles of the body, and I got out of the cave, and I just saw, how big of an illusion it was. And now all of a sudden, society wanted me to be put back in that cave, in that body. And it was quite challenging. I couldn't look at my parents, my teachers, society in the same way, and it was hard. It was a society that I felt like I was like a PhD student reinvigorated. And now they're asking me to go back into like a preschool, and so it was very weird. It was kind of like I had, dysphoria, I guess, with my own age, where there was this inner being that I, really connected to and was empowered to understand who I was, and then I had to play this game of this body, of this being that people saw was just a new vessel, when at the back of my mind I knew that I wasn't this meat suit and I wasn't just a fresh new slate. There was countless lifetimes. And so it allowed me to understand that this was all just merely a play, and I was aware of it. I wasn't, just immersed in the play without having that understanding. So the blinders were taken off, and that was quite challenging. And growing up in an Orthodox, home, it's very, humorous, where I had my near-death experience right before the day of Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, the day of getting your soul ready for a year of manifestation and abundance, and ready to meet the Creator. And little did I know that I was going to meet the Creator, but it wasn't an outer God, it was an inner God. And, it was, to me, it was just, I love the quote that religion, spirituality exists and the afterlife exists, not because of religion, but despite of it. And this to me was, it put a very challenging belief system with all the rigidity and rules. And, I just always thought to myself, how could a God be all loving and all knowing and yet be the most vengeful, judgmental, condemnation form of God? Just a nightmare, chauvinistic. Like, how does that work? And, to me, the best way I could describe it is God is very much a personal connection. As we come from that place, we come from God, and each person is just an different expression in their own unique way, of the eternal source of light and reality. And to me, I just understood that God was very much a personal connection and not, a monopolization in the hands of a select holy few that would, have to dictate and tell me how to get up to the path of the mountain, that I was forever connected to that I didn't need to do anything to do that. All I needed to do was remember, that part and live my life from who I truly was and what I was connected to.
Wow. Yeah, that I can just imagine. I just and even now, you are so young, but
Mm,
you do present young looking and
mm.
also very wise, and I
Try
think
to keep
that
my youth,
yeah,
skin
your skin
products
is
and all
I was
that.
gonna say your skin is glowing, but,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, like a
you know
L'Oreal commercial or I don't know, yeah.
I know when you
Yeah,
said the year that this happened, I was like, "Oh my god, he's such a baby." But
yeah,
it's funny because it must be so weird, um, to go I'm not making it about me, but I just wanted
right,
to relate that as a 2-year-old, I've been told too that there's some spiritual stuff behind it, but, I was elective mute. They call it
mm.
selective mute too.
Selective mutism, yeah,
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 at the time, it was kinda called both, but so I had severe anxiety, I had a
mm,
birthmark on my face that
mm,
people would notice. It was the first thing people noticed. I thought I was that birthmark. Kids would just little baby kids would say the meanest they don't know.
mm,
They're just saying what they don't know what to make of it. And so I became so self-conscious that I just stopped speaking, and it
mm,
was that child way of saying you can't see me. Like if I have my hands up, you can't see me. If I don't
mm,
speak, you can't see me. And which is so interesting because that's a whole other karmic lesson of being seen and that. But I just remember sitting in my Montessori class all by myself all the time. I mean, there
mm,
nobody played with me. I had one friend who didn't go to my school, and I was always alone. But I always felt so removed from what was going on.
right,
And I remember specifically being 5 years old in my room and thinking, there's something about me that's different. There's
mm,
something about me that doesn't feel like I'm part of that. And so I can only imagine that your experience is that times, a million, because I do remember that feeling of I'm not part of this world. And now I look back and go, I know what that was. I get it. And the birthmark
mm,
was just the manifestation of that kind of thing, I think. So I think it's really interesting that at such a young age, how do you even process that? And also, um, going through your youth, and I've spent some time with Orthodox Jewish families as a childcare
mm,
provider, and I know there's a lot of ritual and a lot of religion. How did
right,
you perceive those types of? I don't know if you call them rituals. You can sort of
mm.
speak to this better than I, but how did you perceive those things, and how did you react to them? And did you go with the flow, and were you still happy to do them? Um, or did you always have sort of a different feeling about the way that things were being
Yeah.
done?
No, I mean, I was a rebel from day one. I never
Yeah.
really bought into it. Actually, my mother told me when I was a kid, I was in the playground, ironically, and I got up on top of the playground and screamed that your God does not exist, and I got in
Wow.
trouble. And in a way, it's just whatever what I was being taught was frustrating because it's just I just knew, intuitively everything was so off. But for me, I was able to get very quiet within my childhood, and when I had this, and I talk about this in Life After Breath, it's almost from having this near death experience and my brain shutting down. I was really connected to higher consciousness and higher wisdom. And I was more in love with that world than this false reality. And so from getting in quiet, I was able to have intimacy with eternal wisdom from a very young age. And, it wasn't until like I turned to a classmate and I said, "Do you see this spirit around you? Do you see that?" And I just got, looked at in such a weird way that all of a sudden that oxygen was beginning to just get pulled. And I just felt like you just so alone. But I recognized from being in a place of privacy that I felt a lot more connected than I did around a lot of people because truly love is who we are and what we're forever connected to, but we forget the infinite amount of love inside of us and all around us. And I felt from being in that quiet, I was able to feel that versus the deprivation of that and the limitation of that, in this very much forgetful world that was more connected to this world. It really had amnesia from who they truly were. And it was, I would say the best word was just almost just comical, but as well frustrating to go through that lifestyle, and just how everyone bought into this stuff and took it so seriously and just were so uptight and rigid. It was just very comical to me. But I think also understandable because I think everyone, has their own degree of life experiences. And so I think some people come into life, they are on a higher level. They start off in the master's degree courses, and other people, they're in more of the younger soul, patterns and, stuff like that. But they're older spirits or younger spirits. They don't pretend to know why that is, or why. But I think we're all here in a way to help out and learn from each other, because I think highly evolved spiritual beings have a difficult time living the earth game. And in not all cases, some have seamless, experiences. But for me, the earth game is very, very difficult. And I think a lot of people who are very immersed in the earth game, they feel very deprived, and they're looking, for higher evolved spirits to allow them to uplift. So it's kind of almost like a seesaw ride that we have, where we're all helping out each other in our own unique vantage points in a way. Yeah.
I love that very much. I feel like now I'm in my 40s, I only now feel like, because of all this knowledge that I believe, I don't want to say I'm the expert on everything, but what
Right.
I've come to understand and believe for myself is everything that we're talking about. And now that I see everything as more of a, um not an illusion, it's real, but it's now that I see it more as a reflection of an inner life, and now that I see that there's so much more going on, I feel like the earth game for me is now super fun. And I know, that I've had the luxury of not experiencing a severe trauma in this chapter of my life, and probably not the most severe trauma ever, but I think you get better at it as you age and as you learn. And I think even if you never become spiritual, you do get better at it, about
Right.
navigating the waters, unless you have some difficulty for maybe a mental illness or something that prevents you from being able to tackle it as well. But then also I would, so that was just a thought I had, and you can respond however you like.
Mm.
But I also do want to ask you about your intuitive abilities and
Mm.
what you noticed after your near death experience, and how they manifested to you, and what you've been able to how you've been able to harness them, or anything else you'd like to talk about,
Mm.
in terms of why you think once you cross over, people often suddenly can, do mediumship or healing or that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of it, like I said, in order to really find our own power, we have to, be willing to lose what we think we are. It's like the lobster shedding its own shell. And so who we are is infinitely intuitive, brilliant beings. And I think intuition is a language of the soul. And the more in touch you are with that, it's not like that changes. That's always there. We just become more connected to it from the process of reduction. And so I think expansion isn't like muscling something, or working towards something. It's just simply removing a lot of those barriers to the windows of our inner being. And sometimes there's different shakeup periods, such as an NDE, STE, OBE, whatever it is. But just other times, some people just wake up and it's just, they just have a different sense of reality, different sense of time. And their abilities just, present themselves when they're within their own readiness. I had a friend of mine who did past life regression with Brian Weiss, and after that regression, her mediumistic abilities exploded to where now she's got a full-time practice, and her clients, every single one that I refer to, come away completely blown away and floored. And it's just from that simple exercise of just, having intimacy with our own eternity, and really connecting to our own true nature, that allows us to really connect to the flow of other people and to be of service. But um, my own intuitive abilities, really, I look at it as there's a micro perspective to it. I know within my own energetic healing sessions, and I do have clinical intuition, which Dr. Judith Orloff, talks about a lot within her work. as an empath and as a clinical psychiatrist and stuff like that. But I do utilize that within my work, but it's not like I give people readings point blank because obviously with licensure you have to be careful. But I would say for me, I see myself more on a macro basis where within my writings, just intuitive hits come to me with lessons that not what people want to hear, but what people need to hear. And so the work that I do within my writing and my talks, I feel is very much guided. And so I think I think silence speaks, and if we're able to really get quiet, there's just this infinite flow of wisdom just present for all of us to really guide not only our lifetimes, but in a way to have an impact on those around us. Because we're all here to really inspire and invigorate a sense of knowingness in others, and from remembering ourselves, other people are able to hopefully remember who they truly are from our own, example.
That's beautiful. It is. I agree. It is not adding, but taking away. You're not adding
Right.
these abilities. You're just stripping what's
Right.
covering them up. And I've
Right.
learned that myself as someone who trained to be a medium and didn't
Mm.
know that I was able to do it. And then it was John Holland's book where he said, anyone can learn to do this.
It's so
Not
funny this
everyone's,
yeah, it's so funny. The second you said that, I saw
you
John
knew John
Holland.
Holland. Yeah.
Yeah, because he came to me because he was just like John Holland always talks about living in 2 worlds, like, this world and that world, and the second you said that, I heard him speaking about those 2 worlds, and then he mentioned
Yep.
I love John Holland.
I
He's
love him
wonderful.
too.
Yeah,
He's one of, I mean, I have
yeah.
so many people that I
Great
follow,
teachers,
but
yeah.
yeah, and he's, I really credit him and have told him this in, just Instagram
Right,
message that he really is the person that helped me realize that, oh, I don't just have to be a follower of mediums. I actually can do this myself. And
right,
I may not have been immediately born jumping out of the womb ready to do this work, but it's working and it's incredible what we can do. And I have a very busy mind and I'm very
right,
perfectionistic and I'm a
right.
Virgo and very
I get you,
analytical.
yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like I have that very analytical mind and critical mind. And it's been such, I think I attribute my current state of peace to learning how to sort of relax that part of my
Mm,
mind and flow with intuition and
right,
let intuition guide and to really do my and meditate. And I know that you
mhm.
lead meditation workshops and that
Mm,
sort of thing. And I'd love to hear anything you'd like about meditation because that's another thing that I try to do daily that has really, I'm just going to say the cliche term, it's really changed my life
right,
for the
right.
reason that you mentioned. I just anything you'd like to say about
Yeah,
meditation and what it can
for
do for
sure.
us is great.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, I mean, Virgos are some of my greatest friends, and I had a medium friend of mine who was a Virgo, and he would always say, there's very stigmatized around analytics, but in a way within mediumship, you're getting different pieces of evidence,
Yeah.
and it's almost kind of like you're like a lawyer within a court case. You're bringing up a case to just kind of like explain it. So I think the analytical side, bodes well within what you see, feel, and experience for the client. We're able to accurately describe it where it's got to be clear and crystal to a Virgo because they're very perfectionistic, and and clients appreciate that high standard of care and professionalism within delivery. But yeah, from hypnosis to meditation, if I'm known as the afterlife guy, I don't feel like I've done my job, because I want people to remember that they're afterlife people too. And they're here to bring the hereafter to the here now, as we said. And so in a way, yes, I had monopolization as a young kid from this experience, but obviously hearing others who've had it, it just showed me that, there's a growing percentage of the population of end ears. But, heaven is not something that someone owns. We all are a part of it. It's not in the hands of someone else. And my biggest responsibility is just to give back the lifelessness that I experience in moments of deprivation of oxygen back to other people. And I look at my near-death experience as the school of life that I live my life by and giving everything that I can, whether that was, you know, the the clear knowingness that I can't die and I have an infinite light greater inside of me than any challenge in front of me. And so I just do the best that I can in any fashion to allow people to be empowered in that and to experience that on a direct basis. And I think the difference between religion and spirituality is the personalized knowingness of the experience. I think, religion is more faith-based or belief-based, where spirituality is more of a direct experience, translating itself into a knowing. And I think meditation is a great way for people to just get in touch with themselves, where you just know that you're not this body, that there's just a part of us that exists on a deeper level than just the mind, the body, in our emotions, and it's just this deep level. And I call that the sacred eternal observer. And the more that you're in tune with that, the more that you could just laugh at the notion that once the body goes, we carry this part of us. And obviously we have a higher self too, but our awareness really expands when we cross over. But we just know that this part, our true self can never really die, and that's always with us. So it's intimacy with eternity that you get from meditation.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really could listen to you speak for hours and hours because it does feel very guided. I think you're also just a very intelligent human being and well read and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
it
I don't know who you're talking about.
you just
Right.
say things so succinctly, and I really love the imagery that comes up as well. And I think that you are being so much of service to other people in doing this work. For me, that's you had mentioned earlier in 12-step recovery, being
Mm.
of service is one of the main
Tenants
ways,
and
the
yeah.
tenets, and I am a 12-stepper myself. Happy to be in a sometimes I just wanna say I'm recovered because I feel that way, but,
Mm.
I'm a recovering sex and love addict, and, one of the things that when I have spoken at meetings is I always say being of service, being outside of yourself, in the way that being of service to others is really one of the main self love first, self care, and I that's self care in the
Self-actualization and embodiment
yes,
embodiment of God and,
and
our purpose.
yes,
So,
and
yeah.
then being able to expand that out, starting with loving yourself and then being of service to others. Because when
Mm.
you're of service to others, you can't be obsessed with your own
Right.
stuff.
Right.
It's just, and that's what we're here for, I think. So I love that I just love that notion of, and I love too that you get to do that. I think that's just the coolest thing.
Right, right. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. All power to you, for sharing that experience and going through it. But yes, I think in order sometimes to be an angel or to be a guide, we have, like I said before, you have to go through that experience,
Yeah.
for our own ability to open up the doorways of empathy. Pain and suffering could be a great way to just open up the floodgates and doorways of empathy, understanding, compassion, and inspiration. From being in that place of pain, we really just want to speak to that
Mhm.
person that much more from going through that. And um I think really it does speak to us as a soul, like we said, our karma, our story. We could just continue to define ourselves with the story, or we could say this is about dharma, this is about defining the story, this is about finding ways to not be defined by the story but defined by it, but to define it, in our lifetimes, and to make a mark. And I think so many people just are just in the victim mind and just rehearsing their story and saying, how could I turn this bit of pain into my own purpose? And, I think everything has a purpose, everything has a reasoning within proper time. And I think that keeps people going, and our further belief, leads to the doors of resilience and growth and expansion from that clear knowing that everything that we go through has, a reason. And if you look at things coinciding, it's a mathematical equation with two angles, conjuncting with each other. Things are there for reasons. And that's one thing I learned within my NDE, that this wasn't just a random experience, that this was such a brightly guided life with infinite intelligence guiding it. And I think some people get caught up in the ego or edging God out instead of trusting the infinite wisdom, behind some of what we experience at face value, moment to moment. And that's what Einstein would highlight is the universe a place that works with us or against us? And having, spirituality as a part of our life. And I know Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery, really highlighted spirituality within the helping profession. And I think really led to a lot of positive psychology and transformation in the field versus being very much prior to negatively pathology based, and just, very kind of like medical model in a way,
Mhm.
versus now allowing this whole other part of spirituality to be incorporated within the helping, process. Power to you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, and you said that so well because I think I went in there like, "I am not doing this group I mean, I was loving, but I definitely was
Yeah,
not a joiner, and I definitely was not religious in any way,
right,
which
right.
you do not even have to believe in God
Mm,
if you just to put that out there. But um, any kind of higher power of your understanding. But what I love that you highlighted that because I um, definitely think that the being in having that experience is actually what led me to this kind of
mm,
awareness and work, because I went, wait, miracles actually did happen when I surrendered and
right.
chose
Just a
to let.
shift in perception and
Yeah,
unfoldment. We are these living miracles. We just don't see that, and it's sometimes we have to lose that to remember that. Just how
that's right.
miraculous. But I think surrender is such a beautiful tenet in a way, because I think with anyone is suffering, you're holding on to suffering, you're holding on to yourself, and you're able to just let go of that and accept that. I know that allowed me to transition from suffocation to infinite awareness in crossing over my near-death experience. And I think the ultimate illusion is thinking that we're alone or defining ourselves by suffering, and understanding that that is not who we are. We're infinitely protected and guided, past that. And I think having a belief system and knowing allows us to experience who we truly are.
Yeah, I think that actually that's why I'm so insanely happy now because I feel so free having been through that kind of bondage where
Right,
I was addicted to intensity and drama
right,
and pain to the point where I inflicted my own pain upon myself without knowing how to get out of it.
right.
And one of the things that I find so amazing about the spirituality connection is this podcast was meant to be, it was going to be addiction recovery podcast, which
Mm,
is great. At the time when I was starting it, I lost my voice. I ended up with a vocal disorder.
mm,
So I had lined up guests for, it was
mm,
supposed to be sex and love addiction recovery. And I
right.
really thought that was important to address. I hadn't really heard any great podcasts about it. And then through that journey of losing my voice, it kind of became this instead. This was what I just felt so drawn to. And what's so
Mm,
beautiful, I can never be as succinct as I want to be, is that
doing
I'm
great,
able
yeah.
to thank you. I'm still able to do that same work, but from a broader perspective, because
Right,
honestly, at the end of the day, my belief is that all addictions stem from actually, I think love addiction is the core of all addictions,
mm,
and that love isn't about people. The love is
mm,
about that God-sized hole in our hearts. And
right,
for anyone who's not, well, anyone who's not spiritual probably isn't listening to this, but and I
right.
don't mean that in the biblical sense. I mean it in the spiritual sense that we're lacking that connection with our higher self and with
Mm.
everything that we're made of and part of.
Absolutely. I mean, I love what Neil Donald Walsh, if you read Conversation with God, familiar with Neil, I guess when he's talking about sex, he talked about a synergistic energy exchange. And I think a lot of people, not to get too personal, but I think anyone who's a healer or anyone who's very connected, we crave these climactical experiences because we're not satisfied by this mundane reality. And it's, to me, like I said before, God is just this endless climactical, orgasmic, energy that we're
Yeah.
connected to. And sometimes here we're very much deprived of that. And so we want that through the forms. The issue is that, at times it could be, obviously,
Mm.
damaging. So having a way, whether that's, drug addiction, alcohol, it's just this experience that we want to connect to this, part that we can't define. Once we're able to understand some of the void behind our behaviors, we're able to shift that behavior, to more conducive, routes and, and pathways. So yeah,
That is, that was actually a revelation that what
yeah.
you just said, it's obvious and yet it's actually very profound that
If you
especially
if you can name it, you could tame it. I say,
I
just like
love it.
understanding, like what's the point of origin behind my behavior? Because we get very defined in the story and the behaviors, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not the sex addicts. I want climactical, beautiful experiences, and I'm deprived of that, and I'm looking through that through other people, and again, it's like. I think a lot of times in the new age, we're expect to be the Pope or just like a Buddhist monk, and sex is very stigmatized. But the actual act of it is very much about the God realization and connecting to that, and we
Yeah.
recognize that we could do that without needing to be with someone else, but we could just have that through different pathways, in healthy relationships as well too. But there's a lot of judgment
Yeah.
behind behaviors, and it just it's not, it's just experiences, and we're learning different ways and more skillful ways to utilize our intentions and some of our deprivations behind our behaviors.
That is incredible. Thank you so that actually really, really resonated, and I believe it will resonate with others as well. I think as empaths, I know that connection is my biggest thing. I want to
Right.
connect deeply. I don't want shallow relationships, and I want next level love in all
Right.
areas of my life. And so
Keeping a family related language, right?
exactly. Yeah, and so I think that actually makes I'm like, that's why that was my addiction. That makes so much sense that the passionate ones, the ones who feel that greater energy and we just
Oh,
want to find it everywhere we
our
can.
inner being is very climactical, and the other side is, and we just feel very bogged down,
Yeah.
in this physical body. It can be very debilitating, just very heavy for an infinite part of our being. And it's just either through drugs, through sex, we look through these like cathartic experiences because that, feeds the soul. And, I think recognizing that we could do that, getting quiet, getting into the sacred allows us a little bit more balance, and also not to judge ourselves if that's what we do have. But I think obviously with the appropriate person, allows it to have a lot more meaning, and satiation within our lives.
I love
Yeah.
to end this conversation there because it's so profound and beautiful. I could steal you for 10 hours and just keep picking your brain, but I won't do that to you. Sen thank you so much.
I'd love to do that. I could leave my day job,
I know, right? I know.
do this all day, and that's my life. Yeah,
I
it's
know,
be
same. I
great.
mean, I actually do
Yeah,
this sometimes more than I work and I'm grateful for it. But yeah, I
yeah,
know we have to get on with our lives and our day.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I just want to thank you so much for for first of all
An honor.
reaching out,
Thank you.
for connecting, for sharing your insights and sharing your wisdom. I get so excited to share these with people because I just can't wait for people to hear what you have to share, and I know that they'll be touched and have many epiphanies all along the way. So yes, just so much gratitude, and I just wish you nothing but beautiful things. You are such a light.
An honor. Thank you so much for having me. Keep on doing your great work. And, listeners, if you're interested in contact, my website is jacobelcooper.com. Life After Breath is available on Amazon. It makes a great gift with the upcoming holidays.
And it's gotten great
Because,
reviews from
yeah,
many people that I
Dr. Mahmoudi,
respect.
Anita
Anita Morjani,
Morjani, Dr.
Suzanne Giesman, who I
Suzanne
love.
Giesemann, Dr. Bernie Siegel, to name a few. So a couple New York Times bestsellers. And but I think, this book's, inspiration is the oxygen of the soul. And a lot of intuitives who picked up Life After Breath, they say this is inspiration, and that's
I'm
energy. So do check it
I'm
out.
actually I hadn't had a chance to read it and I am legitimately going to. I'm very excited to read it. So
Yeah,
um I
yeah,
thank you for taking the time to write a book, which I know is
yeah.
no easy feat,
I'm
but
almost finished with my second book called The
ooh,
Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. So do stay tuned. Yeah,
incredible.
Life After Breath is my karma. The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is the Dharma. So
Love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Take care, Jacob. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for being
I
here.
appreciate it. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
You too.